Hey, it's RJ here, and it's been a while since I've done an Answers to Students module, particularly in this format, because been a while, I think, since I've gotten some good questions, but this is a pretty good one, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this student's online name, Artiste something. But let's get to his question, because I think it brings up some basics in the Speed Seduction Toolkit. Remember, when you're using any set of tools, it's important to understand what they're designed to do. If you were a space alien and someone handed you a hammer, if you didn't understand the function of the hammer, you'd be hard-pressed, find it difficult to know that it's meant to go with nails. So here we go. And his question is, basically, he knows when he talks to a girl there are important words, like the word imagine. He wants to know what other words are important, and he wants me to post them. So here we go. I want to introduce the concept, or review the concept of trance words and trance phrases. That is to say, there's certain words, when you use them as commands in the structure of a communication, that tend to activate the right brain, that tend to activate the imagination, and to make people more suggestible. These words often will cause people to do an internal search of the unconscious mind, to do a search of the deeper processes in the mind. Now, this serves many, many purposes, not the least of which is that normal checklist that women hold out in front of them. A guy's got to look like this, he's got to have this much money, he's got to be socially connected. It tends to shut down those parts of the brain and to open up the parts that are more emotionally driven. So that's why we use them. There are certain words that stimulate the imagination. They stimulate the imagination, and they stimulate particularly the visual sense of imagination and send people on that important internal search. Just a few of these, and these are by no means exhaustive, but these are the major ones. Imagine, wonder, picture, ponder, visualize. Again, imagine, wonder, picture, ponder, visualize. Let's look at some examples of how we might use these. And this is an example using the pattern called quotes. So we're quoting our friend. So my friend said, if you were to imagine falling in love now, could you picture that clearly in a way where you could feel amazing? Or would you just wonder how awesome and fantastic it could be to see that inside now? So let's look at this. The first trance word we have here is imagine. So if you were to imagine falling in love, the command itself, the full command is imagine falling in love. Could you picture that clearly? So there's another command, picture that clearly in a way where you could feel amazing. Now, feel amazing is a command, but it's not one of these trance words. Or would you just wonder how awesome and fantastic? So wonder how awesome and fantastic, that word wonder. When we wonder, in effect is asking us to use our capability to daydream, to fantasize. In effect, it's a command to fantasize and to daydream. And we could use those terms, but I think they're a little heavily loaded to say to a girl, if you could fantasize and daydream about falling in love. Even if you put it in quotes, that would be a little heavy. See that inside now. I would have to say, even though I didn't outline it here and mention it, see that inside. That also pretty much, any command where you tell people inside, like go inside, see that inside, think about that inside. These are also what I would call inside phrases, using the term inside. If you were to see inside your ability to fall in love, could you picture that as something absolutely amazing, or you just wonder how good it would feel to surrender to that? Now, as you can see, I'm so used to using this kind of languaging after, 23 years, I can just spin it on the spot. But I think you get the idea. Then there are words that stimulate internal search, but these words don't necessarily rely on the visual sense, but they will stimulate an internal search. Find yourself. Find your own reasons. Think things differently. Recognize, realize, remember, recall. Some of these now, recognize, realize, remember, recall, these are what we call presuppositions of awareness, but we can get that in another discussion. Just know that when you use these phrases, they tend to stimulate an internal search that for all practical purposes is no different than a formal hypnotic trance. Let me give you an example. When you find yourself wanting to be with someone special, there's no need to recognize just how much you long for that to happen. You can just find your own reasons to realize it feels so good to go with it. So let's look a little bit deeper into this. Let's drill a little deeper into the meaning. Find yourself. To find yourself implies a loss of control. If I say, do you ever just find yourself reaching for the refrigerator? It implies that some other aspect of your personality or some kind of drive came up from the unconscious level and sort of grabbed a hold of you and drove you to do it. So it implies a loss of conscious control. It implies an unconscious process. To recognize something, you really don't try to recognize something. The process of recognition is, again, unconscious and happens outside of your awareness. When you're in a crowd and you suddenly recognize a familiar face, that process of recognition is not a conscious one. The feeling, the awareness of, oh, I recognize that person, does come to your conscious awareness, but the process by which you recognize a face is deeply unconscious. It's hardwired. Find your own reasons. Well, find your own reasons may sound like you're having choice, right? You're engaging in a process where you're thinking things through. But in reality, when I say find your own reasons, what I'm really saying is let those reasons come to the surface. It sounds like I'm asking you to engage in a conscious process of thinking things through. But in reality, what I'm really saying is let those reasons come to the surface, or even ignore them and just find yourself acting on it. And again, realize. So if I say when you realize how good it feels to fall in love, I'm not giving you a chance to think it over. I'm not saying, I think you should think through whether you really fall in love and sort through whether it's positive or negative and make a conscious decision. I'm just saying you realize it. You ever just suddenly realize you really feel an attraction for someone special and new? Realizations don't come through a conscious process. Even though we may think things through, realizations only come on their own when we let go of trying to figure it out, when we let go of control. For sure, we may do a lot of conscious studying first, but it's only when we let go that the realization bubbles up from the unconscious. And this is why it's a very trancy word. Then we have adjective adverbs that stimulate internal search, but they also imply a loss of control. And I have here instant, which is the adjective, and an instantly, which is the adverb form. Immediate, immediately. Irresistible, irresistibly. Incredible, incredibly. Now, some of you who are longtime students may recognize these as variations of the incredible connection pattern. Let me give you some examples practically. Examples, and again, this is a quotes pattern. My sister's roommate says that when a person starts to feel an instantaneous connection, they can irresistibly be drawn to immediately act on this. Forgive me for not outlining these words in blue, but instantaneous connection, irresistibly be drawn, immediately act on this. Now again, these words imply a loss of a conscious process. If you feel an instantaneous connection, if it's instantaneous, that implies that there's no resisting it. It just wells up suddenly and you can't fight it. As opposed to, when a person starts to feel a very reasonable, rational, well thought out, slowly developing connection. Instantaneous implies momentum. It implies that it's unconscious and that it cannot be fought. Same with irresistibly. What does it mean to be irresistibly drawn to something? It means there's some force outside of your control, outside of your awareness, and here's the key, outside of your responsibility. If a woman feels irresistibly attracted to a guy, well, then it's not her fault when she surrenders and fucks him. She can just blame it on the desire. It was just too strong for me to resist. It wasn't my fault. I'm not a slut or a bad girl. I just couldn't resist. I'm just a girl who can't say no. I couldn't help it. And immediately, if you're going to do something immediately, does it imply, when you immediately act on something, does it imply a long conscious process of thinking through or sifting it through? No, it implies going for it without conscious thought. Most importantly now are our own personal trance words. When you ask a woman a question about her passions or her moments of discovery, when was the moment you first discovered that you really, really love the art of dance? You'll often hear her say, well, it was this moment when I was performing, I felt this destiny as this surge of energy welled up inside me. So she's leaning on words like energy, destiny, surge. And these are terms, energy and destiny and surge. They're words that don't have a clear dictionary definition. There's a lot of room inside of those words to come up with your own interpretations. Those are the words that you want to repeat back, because it's their own personal trance words that always have the most impact. I'd like to hear your discussion about this module. I hope you